Estelle, do you hear me now?
We can hear you, John.
Oh, good, good. So I will, if you can't, then I guess if you can't hear me, then you might not be able to speak to me, but let me walk through what we've got, what I've got for you. That's just overview. So we recognized back when I was a federal programs director that it was our EL graduation rates were in the 50s and 60s, and we were a little above state average. And I guess that's how you protect yourself. If there's always someone who's worse than you are, you don't feel bad. And I think that's sort of where we were. Um, and so we just were muddling along. And so we decided about 12 years ago is we need to do something about that. We need to affect the graduation rate. So we did a number of things. And the overview is we changed our ESL endorsement class significantly, and I'll talk about how we did that. We started secondary school meetings with every secondary school to look at kids who were not matriculating one at a time with the superintendency. We heavily invested in Latinos in Action in a number of our impacted high schools 8 years ago. 6 years ago, we put into process some monitoring steps that made it easier for our secondary administrators to know who their ESL kids were and what their proficiencies were. And then 2 years ago, we made a real strong effort to attach our ESL kids to getting the seal of biliteracy that the state started. I mean, those are the things that we went ahead and we thought, let's start making some change. And I'll just walk through each one of those and what that means in terms of how that impacted us. Our outcomes, you can just take, we don't have a ton of kids in Davis. And people often say, well, the reason you can do this, you don't have many kids. And I understand that, but it also means we don't have the same amount of resources. And also means that those kids are more spread out in the sense that we have to have more teachers with more skills because we don't centralize these kids in one place. But we have moved from the 77%, 79 to 95% of our ESL kids graduating. I will say this about graduation for us. Graduation to us is the key. More so than even WIDA scores are a precursor, but they are not a precondition to graduation. And when our kids leave us and go to either a trade school, a university, a job, the military, they're not going to have on their application, what was your WIDA score? They're going to ask, where'd you get your diploma? And if that's, well, I didn't get it, the kid's not getting where they want to be next. And to me, that is why for us, our sole purpose 12 years ago is we are not satisfied with graduating 50-some% of our ESL kids. That's criminal. That's got to change. So we did get a change. And what we did to change it was first we changed our ESL endorsement class. It was traditional when we looked at it, it was discrete courses, a 3-credit course here, a 3-credit course there. Course A didn't necessarily talk to course B, and rarely did you ever talk about kids and teaching inside of the endorsement class. We decided instead of having 7 discrete courses that we were going to have a course. And it was going to be ESL endorsement, and we were going to then weave and braid in all of the various curricular requirements into an integrated approach. And not only would that happen, but we'd also give each group of 8 to 10 teachers an individual mentor from the district level who would work with them in their classroom to implement the skills they were learning in the class. And when it was all said and done after the year, since the class is portfolio based, the candidate for the ESL endorsement would have an exit interview with the ESL staff mentor, their building administrator, and a building colleague who already had an ESL endorsement. And that exit interview, using their portfolio as evidence, would give the teacher the opportunity to demonstrate, here are the specific instructional strategies I use with these specific kids. Here are the specific data points we use to inform our instruction, and here's what the outcomes were. It was much more of a, I guess, nowadays we call it a pretty PLC approach, but it wasn't so much just, we wanted to create conversation with teachers about real kids, real instruction, and what types of real instruction create change for kids in classrooms so that they're more successful. The other thing, a couple of years later, the district took on, and this was Dr. Brian Bowles and Craig Paul, who was my predecessor. They decided to meet with each secondary, this is junior high and high school. with each administrative and counseling team and go through a conversation, kid by kid, who was not matriculating toward graduation. So at the junior high level was all of the 8th and 9th graders who were credit deficient. The high school level, it was each 10th, 11th, and 12th grader who was credit deficient at the age that they were. And the school had to say, here's what we know about this kid. Here's who's going to be the contact for this kid. Here's our plan for each individual kid. So we didn't talk about groups of kids. It wasn't, okay, let's take what are we going to do with our 11th graders who are deficient in their cores? Oh, we're going to have this program for all those kids. We talked about individual children rather than groups, because you don't teach groups, you teach kids. You teach individual kids. When we first started this, I can be honest, there wasn't a secondary administrator who liked the meeting. They felt it was inquisitorial. They thought that it was accusatorial, and they were being held to an accountability standard that just was they couldn't make. I will say now, 10 years later, it's a meeting they are prepared for and they look forward to because they've already anticipated it. They're not having a brand new conversation with us. They're having a conversation they've already been having at the building level at their local case management teams all year. So it's not something they have to create out of ether any longer. But the first couple of years, they kind of were creating it out of ether. But it was a way for us to provide accountability to buildings. And I think for us, it was important to have the superintendency involved in each one of those meetings without fail, because it demonstrated to the buildings, wow, this is important to those people. As opposed to, hey, I'll be there. Oh, I got something else. I'll be back. Those are protected meetings that we hold each and every fall as we move into the new school year. Then, of course, let me see. How do I move? Let's move this next. Time out. There we go. Oh, now I'm going too fast. Then, of course, I can't say enough for LIA. For us, it's been what LIA has taught us more than the program itself and what's provided for our kids. And I think all across this is important, is LIA promotes the assets of these kids, the assets of their bilingual nature is an asset that most of our kids don't have. And that with this asset, there's an expectation of service. And with this expectation of service, there is an expectation of accountability. And it provided for us, and Latino population for us is our largest sub-pop, it provided a place where they were essential and they were the most important. And it was solely about that group, as opposed to always trying to have to infiltrate into other groups in our junior and senior high schools. The neat thing to have seen over the 8 years that we've had LIA is now you're seeing the kids who are in LIA and leadership positions are now transitioning into leadership positions in the school in general. They're becoming class presidents. They're becoming, kids who are cheerleaders, who are top football. They're moving out into the school in general in places where before the school wasn't terribly welcoming. I mean, that's the true bottom line. And so I believe LIA and just its focus, and it gave us an opportunity to celebrate those successes in ways that we hadn't found before. And then we had to, for those of you who have been a principal in a big school, think how hard it probably was for you to identify your ESL kids. If someone would walk into your office and say, hey, you've got a full service, junior high school of 1,000 kids. Tell me about your ESL kids, not in general, but in specific. It probably would have been tough to do in a one-stop and at one place. For us, there was no one place that an administrator or teacher or counselor could say, let me look at these kids in aggregate. Let me look at patterns. Let me find a place. So in our data management system, in our student management system, we worked with our programmers and came up with a couple of screens that we found real important for counselors and for administrators. And it was the ESL Monitoring Form. And it basically was a form where you can disaggregate this by any of the numbers. These are all in a school, the 10th grade kids in a certain school in 2019. It gives you their WIDA scores over 4 years. It gives you their language and math proficiencies. And then it gives you their language, math credits, their total credits, their GPA, and how many days they've missed up to the day you actually ran this screen. And it's a red-green report, so where it's red, you're concerned with the red, and you'll see a lot of red there. But I'll speak about that in a second that I think is really interesting. But it is a way for an administrator to be able to talk about this cohort knowledgeably and to be able to strategize what do we do and how effective is what we have done. Because if you look at this form, for example, you'll see, since you can't see the exact student, but you'll notice in the middle of the piece, there is a child with a WIDA score of 3.4, 3.2. That's 10th grader, that's not great. And their language arts proficiencies, 111, math 1-1. But you go across, at this point, they had passed 9th and 10th grade language arts and math. They're 18.25 credits. I don't know why I'm pointing at this because you can't see what I'm pointing at, so I'll take my finger away. 18.25 credits, on pace to graduate with a 2.892 grade point average, has only missed 4 days. Sometimes we think because kids don't do well on standardized tests, they can't do well in our class, and that's just a fallacy. It sure helps, but it doesn't mean that it's a death sentence. And what that tells me is we have a connection to that child. The teachers have a connection to that child and are working individually with that child to be able to ensure that they have access to the curriculum. And just having proficient scores in standardized testing, while that would be preferential, for us still the idea is how do we ensure that they gain credit, have access to the curriculum, and are able to matriculate and graduate. That was always the drum we continue to pound. The other thing that we did, remember I'll go back to talking about how at elementary you've got the teacher. The teacher ends up being the kid's counselor, the kid's mother, the kid's father. It's hard to get lost in elementary school because of the nature of one teacher all day. Move that to secondary where you have 7 or 4 a day, eight teachers over 2 days if you've got the AB days, kids get lost. And so what we needed to create at the secondary level is who owns this kid. Someone's got to own the kid. Someone has to know this kid as a human being, what their strengths, what their weaknesses, what their dreams are, keep tabs on them, touch base with them. We need somebody. And of course, we're Utah. Nobody has extra time on their hands. Everybody's busy. We ended up enlisting and partnering with our comprehensive guidance staff. We asked our comprehensive guidance staff, would you guys meet with each of our ELL kids at least 4 times a year in a formal setting where you bring them in, you sit down, you have a conversation in what we call it's a student language acquisition plan. Unfortunately, the shortened version of that for us is the SLAP plan. We could have been softer, but I guess it just turned out that way. This is a form that each counselor sits down in the fall in the first meeting and covers with each of our ELL kids. We'll sit down, you can see that some of the information at the top is what they come to us with. This kid had a 3.2 GPA, proficiencies were 1, most recent WIDA score was a 3, so we have some struggles. We asked, okay, what are your academic learning targets? What kind of home strategies can we support you in? What do you need for resources? And then what's an incentive plan? And what you see of those choices, they're pre-slugged, but at the bottom of each of those, if there's something that's off our radar that works for the kid or a struggle we didn't anticipate, we include that. And then this becomes the basis for the next 3 conversations that counselor will have. And what we find out from our counselors, once they started having this, it wasn't just 4 meetings a year. It ended up being 8, 10 meetings a year because this is what counselors want to do. This was right in their wheelhouse for us. And it provided that contact. Now somebody owns that kid. So when that kid is struggling in math, that kid's got an advocate to go to that math teacher and have a conversation with that math teacher about, tell me what's happening, how can I support, how can we help this student? And then one other slide that I neglected to put, the other thing that we focused on 2 years ago was on one of the first slides, was the seal of biliteracy. I don't know about you guys, but when that first was brought forward by the State Board of Education 3 years ago, I found it kind of fascinating that I find it fascinating from a political standpoint and a strategic standpoint, because why now? We have always had, and all of us in this room know this, we've always had kids who were biliteral, that their language was biliteral. What I want to be able to say with this is, why now a seal? Well, follow dual immersion. Which kids were just coming around to graduate with a new second language? And we were going to give them a gold star on their graduation certificate. We thought, we've got these kids. We've got to find a way to get to our kids and make sure that our kids are earning this seal. And so we go out purposefully each fall and identify the students, the seniors that we're going to talk to, and say, okay, let's make sure that you have your language arts proficiency as defined, and then let's work to make sure that we can define your Spanish proficiency so that we can get you to earn that seal that the state offers. We had double digits 2 years ago. We had, I think, 16 students. This last year, because of COVID, it was harder to wrap that up. So I believe we had 8 students. But it's one of those things that our kids should be getting this seal, along with the kids who have been in dual immersion, because our kids have those same they have those same abilities. And what I think is frustrating for us is, for so long, these kids have not been an asset. They've been a liability. We have treated their language as a liability. So we have taken them and put them in remedial classes, or in the hallway to work on language with the tutor, or in secondary, we put them in study skills classes or wherever, and they never have access to the part of school that's enriching. That we aren't saying, wow, you have this really cool ability. You speak 2 languages. This is so, wow, I can't do that. I wish, what can we do with this? Rather than see that as a significant asset, we have way too often seen as liability. And I believe that's something that we have to change. And I'd like to think in Davis, we're on the way of changing that. We certainly, without continued vigilance, there's no way, we want to keep the graduation level where it is. Our next step, and this to me is a real important step, is to look at now what kinds of classes are those kids taking when they matriculate in secondary. Do they have access not just to the opportunity to graduate, but do they have access beyond that to CE courses, to AP courses, to any of our baccalaureate classes? Do they have access to those? And if not, how do we, and frankly, we know they don't. I mean, that's one of those rhetorical questions. How do we create an environment for the student and for the school that provides kids access to that top tier of what we offer? We've made the first step, I believe, in terms of providing a solid footing for students to graduate, and that was our goal. That continues to be our goal. But now the next step of that goal is, how do we get them the full experience of our school and not a reduced experience? And that's going to be challenging because, as any of you know, there still exists among any of our schools some preconceived notions about what these kids bring to the table and what their level of academic rigor is, and whether or not they are capable in these upper division courses. Sometimes just have a conversation with some of your AP teachers about bringing some of these kids in, and it'll devolve into a conversation of grade point and demonstration of knowledge that sort of closes the door on them pretty quickly. And so that's where we're going next. So that's Davis. That's what we've done, where we've been. We're happy, but I'm sure it is a bit of a riff on a story that you all have in terms of what you're doing.
So John, thanks. Sorry we had so much difficulty with the connection. But I'm wondering if people have either clarifying questions or questions from your text.
Ooh, to Martin, yes, we would. I'd be happy to share. fact, what I'll do is I'll get some better copies of those. I'll send those to Christelle, and she can share those. And I'm sure that our DP guys would be more than happy to talk with your DP guys, get my people with your people and talk about how they put that together.
Yeah, and also,
Lindsay,
go ahead.
I was going to say, Lindsay, LIA, we can get you Jose Enriquez's email, or I can get that to you. I could put it into this in a moment if I can talk and do two things at once. LIA, we treat it as a class. The prerequisite is a student must be bilingual. So not necessarily Latino, needs to be bilingual. Because one of the service projects for our LIA kids is to go to our elementary schools and tutor our elementary schools, primarily our elementary schools with our highest number of ESL kids. So for example, you will see North Layton Junior High ninth graders walking across the street to Lincoln Elementary School, which is a dual immersion school, and working with our kindergartners in dual immersion 2 days a week for an hour, which is way too cool to see. That's part of their service that they provide for us. They provide thousands of hours of tutoring to our students. And the importance for us, and this is completely selfish, it's supposed to be so the kids can get that service. For us, we have not done a great job and continue to struggle at hiring a teaching staff that is as diverse as our student population. So it gives us an opportunity to get really cool kids in front of, frankly, our Caucasian kids, and to be able to see, wow, these are cool kids of color. These are smart, cool kids. And it gives our kids of color in our elementary school to go, the teacher doesn't look like me, but that 12th grade LIA does. And you take an 18-year-old and you put in front of a sixth grader, of a 12-year-old, and the 18-year-old's got their act together. That 12-year-old, remember, their eyes go up and it's like, you are something. Could I be like you? Yeah, you talk like me. So, I mean, the benefits of it in terms of cross-pollination, I think, are exemplary. So we could definitely put you in contact with Jose. Someone had asked, I had looked that someone had asked, the portfolio idea for the ESL endorsement class. I really think that for us, with the importance of the ESL, it's a 1-year course, it's a cohort. We bring that cohort together for an in-service with us 8 times during the year. So they get sit-down instruction 8 full days. The rest of instruction is in the field, helping them in their instruction. I think that notion of having it as a cohort and having it embedded in their instruction rather than being theoretical, and not making it look like a bunch of discrete college courses on a transcript, but rather going into it saying, you take this endorsement, we will provide you with tools to make you a more effective instructor for kids who are having issues with language acquisition. And not only will we give you those abilities, we will coach you in using them. And then you're going to be the specialist at the end of the year to demonstrate to your administrator your competencies based in your real kids in your real class. The philosophy is very different from just getting the endorsement based on what, USBE says you have to have these specific courses. We went the route of blend. We still get the same content, but we blend it differently.
Other questions for John? Take advantage of him. He's a busy guy.
Oh, and Martin, the dual imagine at Lincoln, the dual language has been, for us, it was a different model, because up to Lincoln, we had all of our dual immersion classes, schools were non-Title I schools out there in out there in the South and the West. And it started with that cohort in kindergarten, and you couldn't violate that cohort. You couldn't add new kids. The beauty of Lincoln, because of its population, is we were able to bust that model. We were able to say that as kids came into the school, we could bring a new 4th grade registrant who happens to have Spanish as the home language. We could bring them into dual immersion in a way that those other schools couldn't. And so if you were to talk to Sue Ann Caldwell, if I were to go to Sue Ann Caldwell and say, Sue Ann, oh, budget's tough, baby, we're gonna have to stop doing dual immersion at your school. It would be hard for me to walk out with my scalp out of her office, because there's no way she'd give that up. So it has worked really well in that model.
Oh my God, Tracy.
Oh, Hannah, you raise a question. I'll tell you, Hannah's question was, have you had any experience engaging parents with the ESL program model? That's probably where we've been most deficient. And that's interesting that you brought that, because if I were to go back, the student language acquisition form at the secondary level that I showed, we kept going back and forth with, are we going to require parents to come to that meeting to sign that piece? And we went back and forth. Well, if we require them to come, then they're going to have to come. We can have a relationship. Oh, but what if they don't come? And then does that mean we don't have the form and we have to wait on the form? We hold the kid responsible for the lack of parent. So we ended up saying, we know we can have an impact on our communication with the kids. So that is a place where we hung our hat. It was not so much on the parent engagement, but with the kids. Where we are getting increased parent engagement is through LIA, because there is a parent engagement level and loop in LIA where we've been able to get greater parent engagement. But I will say that is one place, where our model is lacking, that I would say is a place where it would be lacking.
Hey, John, what last words do you want to say to us? There are actually some people that think you should do this presentation to all the superintendents in the state. One way we tried to do this was to have John come and do this presentation with board members who were on the EL task force. And it always is interesting to me when amazing things are happening, and a lot of them in Utah. We don't really have to go to California or Texas or like other places because people in Utah are doing amazing work. So I think it's up to everyone who's heard this and all the materials that we'll upload on our new playlist, because it'll be recorded. So you'll be able to actually share this with friends, because it's being recorded, and also the materials, and any extra materials that John wants to send to me, then we'll give them to Alex and he'll upload them. So any other questions? Because John is great at monitoring the questions in the chat.
And I'm just uploading some stuff for all you guys for LIA if you want to contact Jose. And that's the website. So you have those. Get hold of, I would just email Jose directly. I think that would be great. And hey, don't want to milk questions out of you here. Christella, here's what I'd say. And you guys, you're here, so you already have the passion for doing something for these kids. This is preaching to the choir, and that's simple and easy. The biggest thing is, and you know this, you will not move a group of ESL students. You will move individual ESL students. Don't treat them as a group. Don't program them as a group. Treat them like we would anyone. Treat them as individual students with a specific set of educational needs, and each one will have specific needs. And treat them individually. And don't teachers come up with excuses of why they in tier 1 instruction can't reach this kid, because the fact of the matter is they can. And the other fact of the matter is it's their job to do so. That's just their job. And if they don't have the skills to be able to address the individual child's needs, then your job, my job, is to provide them with those skills and then ensure that they use them. I mean, that's the bottom line. If you don't do that, I mean, it's one kid at a time, and then they start to add up. But don't treat them as a cohort, because you just don't move groups of people, and especially for some of you, because of the numbers, it can be overwhelming. And it's like, oh, there's not much we can do. Yeah, it's easy for them, but for us, and then you start making excuse making. And we started with excuse making 12 years ago. We did all the yeah buts. Yeah, but we don't have enough. We don't get enough ESL money. Yeah, but Title III doesn't really help us. Yeah, but we're working with so many schools. Yeah, but don't let that happen. And that's for what it's worth. Estelle, I'll turn it to you.
Okay, so John will send us whatever he wants to share with us, and we'll upload it into. The big thing is to make sure that you subscribe to and I'll send it out again after everything is uploaded. I'll make sure that I send it out to you so that you can have access to John's material as well as his presentation. And it goes back to this whole idea that John and I, when we first met, were incredibly committed to qualities of advocacy manifested in everyday moments with students. It's all about that. It's all about us being open-hearted and ensuring that each student has a future in Utah, because we're doing great things in Utah, and we should be proud of that, and we should disseminate it. So thanks, John, and thank you, everybody who joined the webinar. We really appreciate it. And please share. Please share this with all your colleagues, your principals, your counseling staff. This is the big thing about dissemination and upscaling that John and I, have worked on for such a long time together. So John, thank you. We love it.
Estelle, thank you.
Okay, take care.
Good work out there, everybody. Keep it up.
Yep. Thanks, John.
See ya.